For the last 10 or 12 years or so, I have spent a lot of time traveling around the country teaching at different Bible conferences and parish missions and different events where I talk to people about sacred scripture and Christian faith. And I can't tell you how many times in the last decade I have had parents, mothers and fathers come up to me and tell me, my son or my daughter went off to college. I sent them off to college, a Christian, a believer, someone who went to church, and they came back an atheist or an agnostic. They came back and they tell me, Mom, Dad, I don't even know if I believe in Jesus anymore, much less believe in the church. And they asked me, do you have a book that you could recommend for them? And for a long time, I've had to say, no, I really don't. I didn't have a book that would deal with questions such as, who wrote the Gospels? How do we know what Jesus said when the Gospels were written 2,000 years ago? Are they fact or are they fiction? And did Jesus ever actually claim to be God? Or was he just a rabbi or a prophet or a good teacher? How do we know that Jesus is the divine Son of God? And why should we believe that he was raised from the dead? I mean, doesn't that sound more like a myth than like history? And as I began to get these questions over the years, I realized that I needed to put together a book that would gather all those basic questions together in a form that would be easy to read, accessible, engaging, interesting, almost like a mystery novel, a page turner, but at the same time thoroughly well researched and drawing on the latest biblical scholarship on Jesus and the origins of the Gospels. And so I wrote that book. That book is called The Case for Jesus, the Biblical and Historical Evidence for Christ. And this book really is all about going back to square one. You don't have to believe anything with this book. I don't assume that you believe anything. This book was written, you could be an atheist, an agnostic, a Protestant, a Catholic, a Jewish reader, a Buddhist, a Muslim, whatever you are, whatever perspective you're coming from. What this book is about is starting with the historical evidence of the Gospels and asking some questions. Were the Gospels really anonymous? Or do we know exactly who wrote them? What kind of books are the Gospels? Are they fairy tales or folklore? Or are they ancient Greco-Roman biographies? When were the Gospels written? Are they too late to be reliable? Or were they written within the lifetime of Jesus' disciples by eyewitnesses and their followers? And then also, did Jesus fulfill the prophecies of the Messiah? Did he claim to be God, or was he just one more Jewish prophet or one more Jewish teacher? And if he was God, why was he crucified? How could he cry out from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then why did anyone believe in the first century AD that Jesus had actually been raised from the dead? In other words, this book is looking at the case for Jesus. What were the reasons that people in the first century AD, his disciples as well as many others, came to believe that Jesus was in fact not just the Messiah, but God himself, the divine Son of God who had come in the flesh? And then how do we today in the 21st century, how can we know what Jesus did and said? How can we trust that the Gospels are reliable accounts of his actions? And along those lines, what about the lost Gospels that come out every year right around Christmas and Easter? You have these documentaries on the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Judas and so on and so forth. If we accept the four Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as apostolic and reliable, then why don't we accept these other Gospels? Do they undermine the truth of Christianity? Who wrote them and when were they written? All these and many more questions I'll look at in this new book, The Case for Jesus, the Biblical Historical Evidence for Christ. And what you'll see is that when it comes to Christianity makes claims about history. And so if you want to examine the claims of Christianity, then you need to look at the historical evidence and judge for yourself. And that's what I'll do in this book. I'll lay the evidence out for you, both on the origin of the Gospels and the divinity of Christ, and then you can judge for yourself. So if you know anyone who is struggling with their faith, maybe you're struggling with your faith yourself. If you know anyone who's falling away from the church, or who has become an agnostic or an atheist, or just doesn't really know what to make about who Jesus was and who he claimed to be, doesn't know what to believe about Christ and his church, then this book was written for you or for them. It is a tool that is there to help you either deepen your faith Or if you don't believe, to challenge you to answer the question, who do you say that Jesus is?